What's up, everyone? My name is Wes, and you're listening to the Ear Coffee Podcast. Minneapolis composer, songwriter, and multi-instrumentalist Willow Waters is our guest on the show today. After catching our ears with their performance at this year's Drone Not Drones benefit concert, Willow stopped by to talk about their genre-defying new album, The Friction I Demand. We get into their creative process and how it has grown, their many different projects and collaborations, the politics of art, and more. Without further ado, here's my interview with Willow Waters on the Ear Coffee Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. Just to introduce yourself to the listener more in depth, obviously beyond the little chatting we've been doing, kind of a two-part. If you want to do just like a general introduction, talk a little bit about your role and kind of in the projects we're going to be talking about. Obviously, you're the primary composer, songwriter, arranger, vocalist. We're going to get into that. But have you listened to any music today? If so, what was there? Like, what's the most recent music you listened to, whether that was this morning or yesterday?
So my name's Willow Waters. I'm Minneapolis musician, playing a lot of projects, and today probably mostly going to talk about my own project, the Earth Tones, and album release coming up, yada yada. Today I got up not too long ago, so I haven't had a whole lot of time to listen to music, but on the drive over, had the jazz station cruising. I think it was some 40s swing. Okay. Just very pleasant.
Yeah.
Pleasant horn lines.
Yeah. Was it 88.5 or is there a different?
88.5.
Do they used to do like a Sunday morning, like do they still do like the specialties? Because I
don't know if they have a special program on Sunday mornings. I'm not sure what they're doing right now, but they do have the Saturday morning bluegrass.
Okay, maybe Saturday. That's might be what I'm thinking of.
Bluegrass Saturday mornings.
Have enough weird memories of getting shipped off to church with my parents and like listening to the jazz station. Be like, this isn't like I feel like they had like a Latin jazz hour or something.
Yeah, there's a lot of different shows on that station.
I'm sure they've shifted around and they always do good work. But we're not here to talk jazz the entire time, at least fully. Cool. So I love starting interviews in a similar way where pretty much every musician I've talked to, whether in front of a microphone or not, they have a pretty close, intimate connection with music, whether it's just as a listener or obviously as a performer and going into all the different facets that people will engage with music in. So I'm curious, when did you first really start to connect with music on a more personal, deeper level where it felt like something that you could kind of lay claim to versus something that was like you were aware of, that was like ambiently in the world? Whereas like, no, I want to pursue this, and kind of like laying those seeds that lead any musician, I think, to the great beyond, I guess.
Yeah, it's a great question. I was definitely interested in music from a very young age, but I think the kind of crystallizing point or the point when I really started to connect with it was in middle school. Had a hobby with my older brother, skateboarding, and we were watching a skate video, and there was a song by the Eels that was supporting one of the clips, and I was just totally captivated by it. Really caught my ear, and just kept watching that clip over and over again. And eventually was like, let's figure out what album this is. We watched the credits and figured out what album it was on. It was Electroshock Blues. And then, as soon as I got a hold of that album, I just ate it up, listened to it over and over and over again. Really started
a very emotional album to get connected with at a younger age.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of speaks to the kind of music I make, the kind of music I write. It's like, that's what really struck me, was that kind of emotional, very deep and personal storytelling kind of music.
We'll get into some recommendations later, but if you're listening and
I've got many,
you haven't checked out the Eels and haven't listened to Electroshock Blues, you should.
Yeah, it's one of my all-time favorites.
Don't pause the interview, but after we're done, we'll get in the right headspace first. Do you remember the first time you started making your own music, whether it was like, I don't know if you grew up playing in like other bands or were playing
around
in
the
school,
same time,
or like what your kind of initial experiences were as you were discovering like that ravenousness and that connection as a listener?
Totally. Yeah. Around that same time in middle school, I had some other friends who made music too, and definitely had some very silly goofing around kind of bands that I don't know if we ever really even played any shows, but we're trying to figure it out together.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of fun. But lost track of the original question.
Do you remember kind of like what you were feeling like the first time, like maybe one of those first times you did have like a band practice, or like a jam session with those
Yeah,
friends?
it was just like a very creative, explorative time.
Yeah. Very open.
Like no real goals, no real ambitions, just having fun with friends.
No pretensions had set in yet at that early age.
Yeah, we didn't even totally know what kind of music we were trying to make.
Yeah.
Like we listened to different types of things and all had different interests. One of my buddies was really into Metallica, so there's a little bit of that like metal edge to what we were trying to do. But yeah, we were all just learning our instruments, didn't even really know how to execute what we were trying to do. So just goofing around.
Yeah. Going beyond that, when you first started like writing songs, composing, just the next step on the path that would lead you to release multiple albums just on your own name on top of the other projects. But do you remember the first like song you wrote, or like first like real song? Because
yeah,
maybe
definitely.
it's like like when you're still starting out, you like write a couple things. You're like, I don't know if I'm ever going to work on this again. But maybe like the first time that like, oh, I'm going to spend some time working on this, and really like whatever you define your first song as.
Sure.
Do you remember anything about it?
I could pick a few different ones for that question, but definitely wrote a lot of bad songs in the like middle school, high school phase, just trying to write songs and didn't really know what I was trying to say. So a lot of really bad and not pointed lyrics. But yeah, in college, I started to be more interested in and try to take it a little more seriously. I wrote a kind of instrumental piece for a like 7-piece ensemble that I included in my kind of final recital my senior year of college. And I can't even remember what that one was called. I think it was called Seasons. So that was probably the first one that felt like, okay, this is a real thing.
Yeah.
Like actually was proud of the result and felt good about it.
I would hope for a senior recital, just given how cumulative a moment like that.
Yeah, largely that was actually a tuba performance. I was a tuba. Tuba was my main instrument in college. So,
where did you go? Like, what was your
I went to St. Ben's, St. John's up in central Minnesota.
Yeah. Were you playing just like in this like symphonic band there? Or like more
played
composition?
A lot of different ensembles.
Yeah,
kind of jumped around a lot. And played in the brass choir, played in the wind ensemble, the jazz combos and stuff.
Oh, with the tuba too, or just on like trumpet, trombone? Okay,
too. I played trombone and orchestra, and I played guitar in the jazz groups. And
cool. Yeah, I was manifesting a little jazz too, but just because we don't get a lot of that unless it's like Sons of Kemet or something, or something like very specific.
Yeah.
I'm guessing it was probably around that time in college, but when did you first develop an interest in arranging and composing, where it's, I think, a different part of the brain that's getting activated versus performing, or even like, at least speaking for sure for myself, I love your insight on your own process, but even like writing like the lyrics or writing that part of a song.
Sure.
When did you start diving into that realm?
I feel like orchestration and arranging was something I was definitely exploring a lot in college. Had a lot of downtime, and it was just something I like to do with my downtime, and just especially when you're sitting by yourself, it's fun just to mess around with putting things together. But yeah, and then as far as like lyric writing, that was probably post college that I started to sort of crystallize some things I was trying to say and communicate.
Yeah.
I feel like that was the holdup for a long time. It's like I tried writing lyrics because I wanted to write songs, but didn't really have a clear idea of like, what am I trying to say?
It's hard.
What's the point of writing?
It seems so easy, but it's so hard.
Spitting random things out. But yeah, I started to, I don't know, find some meaning, some things that I wanted to communicate around the first couple years out of college.
Yeah. Was that about the time you started working on, maybe this is, I don't know the exact timeline, so maybe I'm unwittingly jumping ahead, but to some of your first solo releases, or like at least the first one that I want to talk about a little bit is Wisdom in the Trees, or what were your other projects going on in that?
Yeah,
in the
there's a little
there?
bit of a window there before I released that first record. I played in a variety of different groups. I was still trying to figure out like, who are the musicians I'm trying to work with? I was just trying to open up different opportunities and played with some different groups. I played the group Taba, that's still around, back in the first incarnation of that band, for a year or two, and then created a band around my music. played with some other people who weren't on that first album. But it was still kind of in the exploratory phase with songwriting and trying to figure out how to do it. And yeah, played with a brass band for a little while, Brass and Body Works. They're also still kicking it.
I love the name.
I was pushing for Bed Brass and Beyond, but alas, we went with the other one.
Lean into the Beyond part there.
Yeah, so there were some other projects, and eventually started to focus on my own music a little more seriously, and put that album together.
When did you kind of start realizing that, I mean, maybe it was just due to experience and like developing confidence, but when that exploratory phase, which I don't think musicians ever really stop exploring, so maybe take this with a slight grain of salt, but like that, when did that period of kind of exploration, playing around, really trying just so many different things, trying different hats on, when did that start kind of codifying into even like a desire to pursue your own compositions, your own songs, and that would lead into your first albums there? And
as I started writing songs out of college and realized I could actually do it, that was around the time I was like, okay, I want to pursue this, but still took a while before I was able to consistently have enough material or like write enough songs to be able to put out a record. But yeah, it was around that time that the first time I wrote a lyric-based song that felt complete and compelling. It's like, okay, I can actually do this. And I kind of started going down that path, and took a few years before I had enough songs. But as soon as I had a handful of tunes.
The avalanche starts slowly it starts just like the one song, the one bit of snow that's falling.
And then kind of building that snowball.
Building the snowball, That's probably a better analogy than an avalanche. Avalanches are typically bad. Songwriting is usually pretty good.
Sometimes it just falls apart, and then there it is. And
that serendipity can be beautiful. Obviously, I want to talk more about your newer album, but at least kind of still staying on Wisdom in the Trees for a moment. That was pre-Earth Tones, which is the band a lot of the folks you've been working with on the last two releases, and just in general. Is that about the same time that kind of collaborative Solar System started to solidify? What was that time like around like putting that album together? And
so for that album, I didn't have
songs,
a band yet.
And I have like enough songs to make an album, because you can keep writing songs, but then it takes a whole other step to put together the album and say, like, is this something I want to do? How do I make this happen in a way that is accomplishing what you wanted?
I had all these songs, and I knew I wanted a big ensemble for it. I had pretty clear idea kind of in the back of my head, like what the instrumentation was like, and I had certain songs with kind of arranged parts written out already. But I didn't have a band yet, so I was still trying to figure that out, and just asked a bunch of friends if they'd be willing to do it. And asked a drummer and a bass player who I didn't know super well at the time, if they wanted to be a part of it. And then the three of us kind of recorded the foundation, and then over the next year or so, just invited friends into the studio and slowly layered things in. And that was still kind of an experiment. I guess it was the first real project, but it still felt a little bit like, okay, I'm searching and trying to figure out how to do this. And things just kind of slowly crystallized, and it was a good opportunity to try to figure things out for myself.
Before we dive into the Friction I Demand, with especially Wilder Wonders, since that album release had a lot of the same folks that it had the more solidified ensemble, while still retaining that same collaborative spirit that was on the first record. But looking back on those two, how do you think those experiences and those records have influenced both just you as a musician in general, and especially your process and how you were approaching the new album? Because it's definitely like the through lines the listener can hear, but it's interesting to hear the artist's perspective as well.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the songs on the latest record I had written prior to even recording Wilder Wonders. In fact, all but one song was written pre-pandemic. And Wilder Wonders was, I knew I wanted the Friction I Demand to be a big, full, 11-piece, 12-piece ensemble. But I had these other songs that I was ready to record, kind of wanted to get out of the way before diving into the Friction I Demand. And a few of them were some favorite tunes that I just wanted to get down that I knew wouldn't quite fit in thematically with the Friction I Demand. So that was, a lot of the songs are deeply tied with the material on this latest record, just because they were written around the same time.
Yeah.
So kind of all those tunes were kind of in a soup, and I had to like figure out, which parts were which.
Yeah,
And,
just scry into the soup.
yeah.
With songs that have been with you for so long, kind of especially focusing on the stuff that's on the Friction I Demand, how does your relationship kind of evolve with these songs as they come together, as they go from that first idea, the starting process was, to the version that we hear on the record, either on the Friction I Demand or on Wilder Wonders, like just staying with that same piece of work for so long? Because some people are very impulsive, they're in a rush, like, oh, I wrote this, let's get it on the next thing, versus spending 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. I feel like
simmering.
A lot of my songs, or most of my music really, is like pretty adaptable and like fluid and mutable, changeable. I feel like there's the core song, like what the structure of the song is, but I allow it to kind of breathe and let the band interpret it. So yeah, even some of the tracks on the album like had a slightly different form 3-4 years ago. Yeah. I just allow time to change them. But the essence, the core of what the songs are about and what they feel like still remains. Yeah. But I just allow them to kind of shift and move over time. And then when we end up in the studio, that's where it is in that moment in time. We capture it. And then I'm sure when we perform it in a week here, it's going to be a little bit different than on the album, but still kind of retain that same essence.
I think that's one of the best things about just any live performance. Like, I don't want to hear exactly what's on the album. I want to hear
it's not perfectly scripted. Like, there's room for improvisation within my band, and it's part of how I pick the musicians that I work with, is people who can like lean into that sort of in the moment playing.
Definitely, even just like having listened to the album, but also like being vaguely familiar with some of the other artists, just makes sense that there's a lot of improvisation, or that's at least something that's part of the process. And I'm biased. I love it when people incorporate that.
Yeah. I mean, it reflects my interest in jazz and improvisatory music. It's definitely, very central to what I want to do.
Just I guess to lay things out here now that we're kind of fully talking about the Friction I Demand is your latest record. It'll be out, should be out now by the time you're listening to this, but it was released early May 4th. It's the first new music you've put out since 2020, but like you were saying, all of it's kind of been in that soup, all been worked on together. When did this album specifically, just before even bringing in like your band and like from your perspective, when did the world of the album kind of start to solidify or take shape? And you're like, okay, these are the ideas I'm addressing. These are the themes that I've been spending a lot of time thinking about and writing about. Here's the musical space that I want to create, even if it's still kind of in your mind. And then once the band comes in, then that's when it kind of, you can start conducting it, or everybody starts adding their pieces, and it becomes the final result. But when did it go from just a collection of songs that you'd been working on for time to, I want to make this into something. I want to make this into the Friction I Demand.
Yeah. Like I was saying, I had kind of these 2 albums worth of material. And actually, like, Wilder Wonders was the first album to come out, but I feel like it was the crystallizing of the story of the Friction I Demand that kind of parsed out those tunes as being the ones I wanted to record first. So it was kind of around that same time that I was working on Wilder Wonders that I started to see the story arc, the through line between these songs, and kind of the way they fit together. And it came together really quite quickly in terms of like song order and how the overall story of the album flows. And like, it just seemed very clear that these songs have the same overall theme and like tie together into a web that makes sense.
How have your kind of I feel silly saying politics, but like your personal beliefs, just like because there's a lot of power in that's focused on both these albums, where whether it's connection with nature, just development of the self, just kind of dealing with the fact that everything feels like it's on fire all the time, and trying to wonder what we can do about that. How does that influence like your song? Has that always been like these more I don't want to say topical, that sounds almost dismissive, but
I know what you mean though.
How does that, has that always been something you've wanted to and been drawn to in your music? Or has that just been something that's been extra resonant with these projects, with especially the Friction I Demand?
Yeah. I feel like for my own songwriting, I don't really know any other way, I guess. It just like feels like when you're trying to write a song, you're trying to communicate something that you're feeling. And yeah, it's hard to separate your beliefs and your the things that you believe are important in this world. It's hard to separate that from what you're trying to write about. So it just feels like a natural part of the process to reflect on what's going on in the world, reflect on my relationship with the more than human world. And it just feels very natural and ingrained in how I process. A lot of songwriting for me is just kind of processing and moving through big feelings and big things in the world and trying to make sense of it, sort it out.
Yeah. That sounds like, just like catharsis is such an important part of your songwriting.
Yep. Most definitely.
When you are maybe even just like first sitting down to work on a new song or casting your mind back when you were working on these songs, was that kind of the process where you would sit down, you had a thing you were like just really feeling, and then seeing how that comes out on the page or comes out musically, or what's the variety like then? And I'm just imagining each song has its own story.
Yeah, it really
without
is
going track by track,
song by song. Everything comes together in its own way. Like Hollowed Bones, the first single from this record, really just came out in like a stream of consciousness. Kind of in two separate moments, though. I had, I think 2 days prior, written this poem, kind of reflecting on just the feeling, the like visceral experience of being a transgender person and the way the world perceives you, and kind of how that perception, just how to react to and how to interact with that perception. I had written this poem about it, and it was like, there was kind of just a stream of consciousness, just what I was feeling, just kind of let it all out in one breath. And then a couple of days later, I was just sitting with my guitar, just kind of noodling, improvising a little bit, and then stumbled across something, and then just similarly, just kind of stream of consciousness played the pretty much exact song form of the tune. And then a couple of days later, realized that they were the same, like they were the same feeling and they belonged together.
Yeah, I think that realization is like a separate skill that artists develop, where you're like, maybe that's something that people notice more when they're putting like a EP or an album together, where you're like, I am noticing all these through lines and all these different ideas. It's like, I've been thinking about a lot of the same things. And
sometimes it's kind of serendipitous and you don't even really, it's not even a cognitive, like I'm looking for it. But like,
you're like, I'm going to write a song about insert topic here.
Yeah. Like there was a song that I put on the first record, Deep Power is the song, where I had written these lyrics like years prior, this poem, and kind of had completely forgotten it even existed. And then stumbled across this melody and these chords when I was out and visiting my brother in Northern California. And I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know what it just felt like this isolated like instrumental piece, and didn't know what to do with it. And then another year passes, and then I start singing the melody randomly when I'm kind of in a deep grief moment. And then I remember like, isn't there a lyric that I was singing this to? And then went back in my journal, flipped back a bunch of pages, and like, there it is.
There it is.
And then I realized that they were like exactly the same feeling and meaning, and then put them together despite being these like disparate points in my life.
Yeah, that's like the best kind of like connect the dots, where it's like totally unexpected.
Yeah, it surprised me. And
very serendipitous.
It was, one of my favorite songs. Still one of my favorites to play.
Cool. Given just how many different instruments you play on this record,
jump around a lot. I definitely have ADHD.
on top of all the composition and writing, did you always want to bring in all these different instruments that even you just play, or was it like, I know how to play this, let's see what this sounds like?
Like, sometimes it's experimental, just like, I wonder what
fits,
this would
obviously.
do.
Don't
I wonder what this instrument would, how this would influence the sound. But I think more often than not, I have a pretty clear picture of like what kind of sounds I'm looking for. And I feel like the instrumentation of the band is like, the core elements of like what I typically hear in my music. yeah, I like to play a lot of instruments, and I jump around a lot. Some songs are written on guitar, some on piano, and yeah, I like to play a lot of instruments. So sometimes I want to play them. Sometimes I would rather have someone else play it. Just depends on the song. Depends on what the
depends on the song.
inspiration
Depends on the feeling. When you were in those early days of just kind of jamming with your Metallica buddy and all that, did you ever think that you were going to play so many instruments? Was that like a cognizant ambition?
No, definitely not. I mean, I wasn't dreaming about it necessarily back in that phase, but yeah, like I say, I have ADHD, and just the way that my brain works, I am very distractible. And whenever a new opportunity presents itself to me, I tend to take it up. And and like the first example of that was I played baritone as my first instrument in school.
Okay.
But then I wanted to join jazz band, and there are no baritones in jazz bands. It's like, okay, I guess I'll pick up the bass.
Yeah.
And then there were 5 bass guitar players in our middle school jazz band. And we all played at the same time, and it was ridiculous. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll start playing electric guitar. And me and my buddy Eric Arnson started trading bass and guitar. And so things like that. Just like reasons to try a new instrument. Sure, let's do it.
Oh, I'm getting terrible flashbacks to middle school jazz band, like the hyper specificity of
it was
like,
pretty outrageous.
We're not gonna cut people because it's like middle school. So
I mean, it was the right choice. We all got to do it. We all got to learn.
It's so like not in a bad way. It's just so silly and so
it was pretty
endearing
sometimes. But yeah, endearing as well for sure.
Yeah, but like you also like go to that concert and you see all 5 basses standing out there and you just have them over, do like a double take. You're like, are they all gonna
really
play?
What's happening?
Oh, they are. Okay, cool.
Yes, we are.
We're in it. Let's take it as it. Let's let it in. Let's go with it. With all the different collaborators between the saxophonists, I was very excited to see Anna on here just because I've been a big fan of her other band, Rebecca, and on top of. We'll talk about this in a minute, but the Drone's Not Drone collaboration. Then obviously Thomas, I love having all the sax interplay. Then all the backing vocalists. Emily, who put out the album, and Sister Species, another beautiful person.
Another band that I play with.
Super lucky to have in the world.
No doubt.
And all the other folks who did so much for the album, but are at least new to me.
The list goes on.
The list goes on. How did you balance your vision for, especially this album, but also I guess just for Wilder Wonders, since a lot of the same folks? How did you balance your vision, your concept, your ideas with bringing in so many different folks? Because maybe it's just kind of like the way we're conditioned to think. It's like too many cooks in the kitchen. But I think having listened to the album and hearing you talk about it, does not sound like that was the case where there's any kind of like overwhelming needs. Like, oh, everybody has to do everything all the time. It's just much more kind of fluid. But how have you balanced that? How have you brought these folks into the fold to add so much to the album and just really contribute and make this great piece of work?
Pretty easy, honestly. I feel like I play with musicians that I trust and feel like have a similar intuition musically, who I feel like understand what I'm trying to say musically, or I'm trying to say something similar in their music. So yeah, it just felt very natural and easy with the first Wilder Wonders record. It was a smaller group, but it didn't feel any harder to make the songs work with a larger ensemble and balance everybody's input. Everyone has a lot of freedom in my band to interpret things the way they want to and bring their own soul, their own self into the music. And it just works. I don't know. I don't have to try super hard. I just communicate the parts I want. And when there's room for improvisation, I tell them that, and then they play what they play, and it usually works. Yeah.
I think there's a certain beauty in not being able to explain that, where like, it's like, it isn't like, oh, well, I dictated this bass part. Like they're kind of making like the puzzle pieces. Like it all just kind of came together and you don't really know how.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like, oh, well, this is awesome. This is that gratitude that kind of comes to that without having to stress over that, hopefully, too much.
They're all pretty good at responding to, any feedback or ideas I have, and it can give them a lot of freedom to interpret. And I might have a note about like what the feeling is in this moment, or what the shift should feel like, or like the end of the album is very much like drifting leaves, kind of falling leaves, and yeah, those types of descriptors tend to translate pretty well. And
Yeah, it's just like the completely like play like a drifting leaf.
yeah,
like
that's sometimes all I need to say. And
literally, no, that's the best.
Crystallizes the idea.
Absolutely. Just kind of off the top of your head, what is a moment on the album that really stands out that you're especially proud of, whether it's just something that you think turned out exactly like you wanted to, that you're just extra excited about, or took a long time to come together and it turned out beautifully and you're just kind of proud of the struggle?
Yeah.
Just a kind of, not quite like a highlight, a low light, but just a moment that really stands out. It's like, I'm really glad this came together the way it did. I'm headbutting the microphone. Sorry, Joe. Just that stands out to you. Because I'm hoping there are at least there are many, but
there are several moments like that. The first one that comes to mind though is the kind of the ripping sax line in the middle of Hollowed Bones.
Yeah,
just that climax really captured what I was trying to express through this song. The like the deep stirring, the heartbreak of sort of what I'm referred to sometimes as the cisgender gaze, the way it hits you. That moment in the album just like really speaks to what that feels like. The kind of the chaos of that kind of ripping sax line with the huge, massive drums and the like bombastic piano playing in the background. Just the way that all comes together really strikes me every time I listen to it. The full band just really pulled it together.
Something about a sax solo that always expresses chaos. It's like, I don't know why. It's kind of a one-to-one. It's like, well, how do we...
John Coltrane opened that door and then we've all...
we've all been standing in his shadow for like 70 years.
Yeah, pretty much.
Do you have a favorite Coltrane release?
Oh,
just
many.
Complete the side note, just as a huge Coltrane fan.
I mean, Love Supreme is just one of the best things ever.
Yeah, unimpeachable.
Yeah. And the several releases around before and after A Love Supreme, I think, are some of my favorites. That's my favorite era.
Have you listened to the Live at Seattle?
It's
like I think it's like the only or one of the only live recordings of around that time where they're playing the material from Love Supreme.
Okay.
I think it only got put on vinyl like last year.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know if it's been floating around.
That one. I'll have to look it up.
Closer to like the really chaotic stuff, like the Ola Tunj concert and stuff like that with
some of those latest releases are pretty wild.
Not to dwell on just jazz for too long, but
we can.
I can't help it. I'm having a great time.
With that.
I came downstairs, I think right after Pharoah Sanders had passed, and my roommate was listening to one of his releases, and I wish I could remember which one it was, but like it like stunned it, like it kind of stuns you just because it's so cacophonous very and so overwhelming. You're like, this is just noise, and I don't know how to process it or like filter it into something resembling music in my head, but like it's just so overwhelming.
Yeah, I really appreciate that Pharoah Sanders often had like reaches that point of like it's almost so chaotic, it's hard to recognize it as music, but it like comes from a very stable place at the beginning of the song, like climbs up to that point and then climbs back down.
Yeah,
I feel like Hollowed Bones is kind of reflective of that. That type of song construction where it starts very stable, reaches a point of kind of chaos, and then returns. Which is kind of the thesis of the album too. It's like a descent and a return, descent into the darkest places, and then a return back to homeostasis.
Yeah, the progression I think is very apparent, just obviously within the songs, like with Hollowed Bones, like you were saying. But I think you can follow that thread while you're just listening to the album, like from start to finish. And like, there's nothing wrong with an album that's just like, oh, it's just 10 songs in a row, and they all are great, but they don't necessarily like have a greater connection musically versus something that is a little bit more, you're kind of painting like the hills and valleys, and
it's definitely a tapestry, a landscape painting. Yeah, if you were to see the whole album as a large picture, for sure.
Yeah, great. Shifting gears a little bit, I do want to talk about Drones Not Drone.
Yeah.
I did not realize that it was coming up, and I'm still beating myself up for not being able to make it, but it's also like 24 hours long, so it's quite the deal.
It's a very special thing.
Yeah. How did you get involved with that? How did you connect with Anna and Colleen for that specific kind of just one-off at the time performance? Sure. And talk a little bit about the experience, because
for sure.
I fortunately it's been on Bandcamp, I think, like the full thing, so I was able to listen to it, and I just love anything to do with that. Would love to hear a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, it's a really magical thing. Yeah, just the concept of having
Or drone, not drones. I got it back.
Yeah, totally.
Very clear. I'm not pro drone.
Yep.
Warfare. To clarify,
drones. Only drones. Yeah. So yeah, just the idea of having a nonstop music for 28 hours is really exciting to me. The way the band's like seamlessly transition from one
even
to the next.
listening on the Bandcamp, I can't.
It just
in person
one
even better.
fluid experience, but with so many different personalities and characters within it. It's just really exciting to be a part of that. My first experience with it was, I guess, a few years ago at this point. Played some tuba along with drone band. It was like a horn ensemble led by Noah Ophoffen Baldwin and Cole Pulis.
Oh, with Cole. Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, so they invited me to play in that horn ensemble.
Great.
So that was my first experience with Drone Not Drones, and it was really cool. Had a good time. And yeah, wanted to be a part of it again. And then this year, got a message from Anna and Colleen and invited me to play along with them. They had secured a slot and wanted to have another musician on the ensemble. So yeah, we just got together once or twice and messed around a little bit, tried some ideas, and it was very free form. We had some loose ideas of what we wanted to do. And then I wasn't even planning on playing piano, but I was like, oh yeah, they have a piano here. So I
why not?
Brought my trumpet, but also was sitting by the piano the whole time. And yeah.
Serendipity keeps on coming up, especially with something like Drone Not Drones.
Yeah, just kind of breathing into the moment for sure. Feeling the energy of the folks playing before us and just trying to tap into the room, tap into everybody's energy in the room and try to reflect it.
Yeah. More as a listener, I guess, but what kind of has been your relationship with ambient and drone music since there was a tiny part of me before spending time with your actual solo music where I first came across your music because of Drone Not Drones, and like seeing like Anna and Colleen plus I was like, oh, well, if they're working with this person, they must be pretty cool. Let's see what they have. And I'm very grateful to have come across your music in that way. But I was expecting maybe more ambient and was very happy and pleasantly surprised with what I came across. But what has been your relationship with that, either just as a listener and maybe as someone who has played with maybe one-off groups, but played in that kind of field as a musician performer as well?
Yeah, I've always been interested in it. I've always enjoyed listening to it. One of my first favorite albums was Parentheses by Sigurros.
Yeah.
And I don't know, lots of music in that kind of ambient experimental categories. Always been interesting to me and find it very calming and soothing most of the time. Yeah. Unless it's noise ambient, then it's less soothing. But I enjoy that too. I mean, I've worked a lot of shows like that. I work as a sound tech sometimes as well.
Cool.
Used to run things over at Seward Cafe many years ago at this point.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's something that's always been interesting to me and feels pretty easy to tap into. And as long as you're playing with other people who also have a similar sensibility, it feels pretty relaxed and easy to approach music that way. Don't have to think about it too hard. Just kind of stay stably in one tone center, or one key center,
which is freeing yet also limiting, but in a very deliberate and beautiful way.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, it feels like a good style of music to just like lean into more meditative emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. This is more in general again, but describe a moment when you felt like the music you make and the music you're making was really fulfilling or accomplishing what you wanted from putting it out into the world, where you kind of similar to that moment of like that highlight and moment of proudness and pride on the album. But this can be a lot of time when I ask people about this, they mention like album release shows where they just kind of the community and the experience of having that kind of celebration can be really powerful. But whatever it is, just when we're like, this is why I make the art that I make. This is why I want to do this. This is why I want to keep doing this.
Totally.
And kind of get that overwhelming rush of hopefully a lot of really good feelings.
Probably for me, it was honestly even before I released my first record with my music. I was playing with this folk band, the Bolt Weevils. And yeah, just being in that band generally, I think created that feeling of just like playing with people that I loved and making music that felt really fulfilling, and felt like we were communicating something very real. And yeah, so playing with that band, and yeah, the first couple of shows were just very exciting to like, this was the first time I was in a band that felt like we were really making it happen.
Yeah.
And was stoked with the results. Very grateful to have played with those musicians. Peter Breen, the main songwriter for that band, now plays keys in my band. And so that connection has been a very long-standing collaboration. Very special person in my life. And yeah, so that's the thing that I think that's the band, or that's the moment in time that stands out the most, is like the first time I really felt fulfilled in my work as a musician.
Awesome. What's something that you love about your art or your creative process? Just as broadly or as narrowly as you want to interpret that. Just something that you
I think I love that
about
it's a
your art.
tool for me to move through very difficult moments in time and difficult feelings, different things to process. Sometimes I feel like I'm kind of stuck or trapped in like a grief moment and don't know what to do with it. And then I sit at the piano and just push my energy into the keys.
Yeah.
And then something releases. Like you say, very cathartic. A lot of my songs and a lot of my relationship to music is catharsis. So yeah.
Awesome.
That's how I would answer that.
Cool. Just gonna start wrapping up here. The Friction on Demand is out now at the time you're listening to this. It's on streaming services. It's on Bandcamp. Any
Spotify,
other places that people can look to find it, or staying connected with the album. Are there any, or just pretty sure the standards?
Just the standards, yeah.
Cool.
Bandcamp and Spotify are probably the two main ones that I would recommend.
Yeah, at least could toss you a few bucks if you want to buy it.
Yep.
Any plans for physicals? Maybe
there are CDs.
Unbiased.
There are tapes.
Nice.
Limited release on the tapes though. Okay. So if you want tapes, you should hop on it.
Yeah.
I think I'm only going to print 50 of them. And then CDs. I'm hoping maybe someday I'll do vinyl, but right now I don't have the money for it. So that's, it's not happening right now.
The money, the time, the logistics. It's
people happen to like it and it does well, maybe. But for now, digital or CDs or tapes.
Yeah. So definitely check that out there. What is in the immediate future for you as in your creative ventures? We're talking before the album's even out, so hopefully you'll be able to kind of not necessarily rest on your laurels, but take a breath, feel some pride and some joy that you put something out like that, and have an album out in the world. But anything you're looking forward to pursuing next, or
I've got a lot of material yet to be recorded. Like I said, all this stuff on this album is years past. So I've got a lot of new material that I'm looking forward to recording and exploring with the band. Might do some more solo-based recordings as well. This past month, in April, I recorded with 3 of my other projects. Carlisle Evans-Peck is working on a record. Ginger Bones is working on a record. Sister Species just started recording this past week. So those 3 albums will start to crystallize over the summer. We'll see when they come together, when they're out. We'll see. Who knows?
Just give them more time.
Got lots of shows this summer with both Ginger Bones and the Earth Tones and many other projects scattered about. So definitely keep your ear out. You can find any of my shows on my website if you're curious.
I recommend doing that.
So lots of shows, lots of records. Gonna skateboard a lot,
Cool. I like ending interviews in the same way as well as starting them the same way. What are some local or DIY underappreciated bands or artists that you think people should check out?
Great question.
Definitely,
there are so many.
Parents should check out. Start with the label roster for Oral Vortex. Check out Willow's other projects.
Spaceport.
We just had Spaceport on the show.
Very cool. Yeah,
so
love Spaceport.
That crew is putting on a lot of really great stuff.
Yeah, actually, Ariana's going to play cello at the CD release. So
hell yeah, that's great.
But too many to name. But just a couple of features. I mean, first that comes to mind is the folks that are playing at my opening up for the CD release show. Bad Posture Club, one of my absolute favorite local bands. Totally different direction. Ice Climber is a really cool improvisatory. hard to quite pin down what they're doing. There are so many influences coming together.
I was
kind of mixed
confused.
cast.
I always confuse Ice Climber and Ice Blink.
Yeah, different bands. Ice Blink is also incredibly cool.
Yeah. Some local ties.
And Cole and other folks.
I think they're no longer based locally, which is a tragedy.
Right. I just want to try to figure out one more I could throw out there. I have like
there's
10
so many
names jumping in my head. I was like, how do you pick one out?
You can say all 10 if you really want to.
I suppose I could.
You just like speed round, just boom, 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 boom.
Well, I play with them, but I definitely want to talk up and mention Carlisle Evans Peck's name again. I'm just absolutely in love with their music. So emotional and just like very heartfelt and deep and very thoughtful music. So if you haven't listened to Carlisle Evans Peck, I highly recommend checking out their music.
Cool. Well, yeah, that'll wrap it up. Once again, Friction I Demand, released May 4th. It should be out now by the time you're hearing this, so give it a listen. Regardless of whether you enjoyed this chat or not, if you think I'm annoying, the album's better, so just listen to that instead. Thank you so much for taking time on your day, Willow.
Thank you so much.
Great to chat with you.
So glad to be here. Appreciate you.
Ear Coffee Podcast is a companion to the blog of the same name. If you like this episode, please leave us a rate and review so we can stand out among the other music podcasts. You can follow us at Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram @Ear Coffee. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.